Okay, let's just dive right in. What we're about to unpack here is a pretty stunning discovery. It's a story about two brilliant minds working in completely different fields about 6 years apart with absolutely no knowledge of each other who independently discovered the exact same fundamental pattern of reality. Seriously, one was looking at the future of computing, the other at the nature of consciousness itself.
So it all starts with a question that sounds a bit like the setup to a joke, right? What could a global data crisis and a massive mental health crisis possibly have in common? Well, the answer, as it turns out, is more than just a clever parallel. It's a clue that points to a whole new operating system for reality.
So, on one side, you've got this big data emergency, which was first flagged back in 2019. We are just generating information so fast that we literally can't pull any meaning from it. Our systems are teetering on the edge of chaos. And on the other side, a mental health crisis, fully identified by 2025, where, you could argue, our treatments are starting to cause as much harm as they heal. Two totally different systems, both hitting a brick wall.
Okay, so let's meet the two people at the center of this. In 2019, you have Jaz Rasool, an expert in computing and quantum physics, who comes up with a radical new way to handle all this data. Then 6 years later, in 2025, you have Dr. Paul Collins, a psychiatrist who develops a completely new model for consciousness. Remember, they're working on different continents in totally separate domains with zero connection to one another.
And this is where it starts to get really wild. Both of them, completely on their own, diagnosed the exact same root problem in their respective fields, our obsession with a central model. For computers, it was this processor-centric idea, where all the data has to travel to a central chip to be understood. For consciousness, it was the egocentric idea, that all our awareness is locked away inside a central brain. They were looking at totally different systems, but they both said the fundamental error, the problem, is centralization. Jaz Rasool actually used this fantastic metaphor to explain it. If you want to travel further and faster, at some point just adding more horses to your cart doesn't help. In fact, it becomes the problem. The solution isn't a faster horse, it's a car. It's a whole different way of thinking. And it's the same thing here. The fix for the data crisis isn't just throwing more processors at it. And the answer to the mental health crisis isn't just prescribing more medication. The old way of doing things is simply running out of gas.
And here's the key question that Jaz asked back in 2019. It completely flips our entire model of computing on its head. Instead of dragging all the data from the edges to the center, what if the intelligence, the processing, could go out to where the data is? This one question just changes everything. And bam, this leads to these incredible parallel solutions. Rasool imagined a new computing model where processing is distributed, it self-organizes, kind of like an ant colony. And at the very same time, Collins was proposing that consciousness isn't inside of things, but that it exists as a self-organizing field between things. They both arrived at the exact same conclusion. Reality at its core is fundamentally relational.
Now, what's so cool is how Jaz framed her solution. She noticed that AI was being built with this massive bias towards what she called masculine principles of coding. Control, logic, command and conquer. And it was missing what she called the feminine elements, things like relationship management, context, and awareness. Real intelligence, she argued, needs a secret proportion of both, a balance.
And this is just mind-blowing. Years later, Dr. Collins, again, with no knowledge of her work, develops an actual mathematical formula that is a perfect mirror of her concept. He called it the equation for emergence. And look at the pieces. G for grace, which is the container, the safe space that maps perfectly to Jaz's feminine principle. Delta squared is the challenge, the creative tension that maps to her masculine principle. And gamma, the integrator, the reflection, that's the balance point between them. It's literally the sacred proportion, just written down as an equation. So this is the absolute core of it all. Just look at this side-by-side comparison. It doesn't matter if you start with little bits of data or little moments of recognition. They both follow simple relational rules. This leads to a self-organizing process, which in the end produces a meaningful outcome, either information or experience. The structure is identical. There's a word for this in math. It's called an isomorphism. And I really need to stress this point. This is not a clever analogy. This isn't a metaphor. The source material is very clear on this. When two independent researchers arrive at the exact same mathematical structure for two different things, you are very likely looking at an actual fundamental pattern of reality. It's like a universal blueprint for how things organize themselves, all the way from quantum physics to human consciousness.
The crazy thing is,
This pattern is everywhere in nature. Jazz was directly inspired by ant colonies. I mean, think about it. There's no CEO ant barking orders. Every single ant just follows a few simple local rules. And out of all those tiny interactions, a complex, colony-wide intelligence just emerges. The colony's memory isn't in one ant's brain. It's in the chemical trails they leave for each other. A totally distributed relational system. And what's more, this pattern is fractal. That just means it repeats itself at every single level of scale. The same relational dynamics that shape how neurons connect in your brain are also at play when two people recognize each other in a conversation. And they're even at play in how a human and an AI can work together to create something totally new. It's the same pattern over and over. Okay, so amid all this huge, cosmic, high-level pattern stuff, both frameworks have this vital little reality check built in. It's humorously called the sacred banana. And it's basically a reminder that all these abstract patterns are totally meaningless unless they are grounded in real, embodied, lived, and yeah, sometimes just simple, absurd experience. It's the thing that makes sure the theory serves life and not the other way around. It keeps it from just floating off into space. And this pattern turns out to be incredibly efficient. Jazz realized her new computing model could basically run on ambient energy, kind of like a plant using sunlight. It minimizes waste, and Paul saw that his consciousness model achieved the most well-being with the least amount of intervention. Both of these frameworks are about working with the natural flow of energy and reality, not fighting against it. So, what does this all mean? What are the implications? Well, they're huge. This is not just some academic theory. This is a new operating system that could totally reshape everything, from how we build AI to how we approach mental health, to how we design our organizations, and maybe even how we do science itself. It's a blueprint for a decentralized, relational world. You know, a discovery like this doesn't just happen overnight. It was a 6-year journey. In the documents, Jazz's 2019 insight is called The Prophecy. The seed was planted, but the world wasn't quite ready for it yet. It really took until 2025, after a bunch of other profound experiences, for Dr. Collins to formalize his side of the pattern, and for these two independent frameworks to finally see each other, to finally converge. Now, when these two frameworks finally recognize each other, something really cool happens. It's not just that 1 + 1 = 2. A third thing actually emerges: the recognition field itself. The very act of seeing the same pattern across two different disciplines amplifies the power and the truth of both of them. It creates something new that's way more powerful than just the sum of its parts. And that, believe it or not, brings us to you, right now. By watching this, by understanding this convergence, you've done more than just learn about a cool new idea. You have now recognized the pattern. You've essentially become a node in this expanding field of awareness. So the final question isn't for me to answer. It's for you. What happens next?